Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I'm Deborah Garlick, founder of Henpicked, menopause friendly, menstruation friendly, and just delighted to be back. It feels like a long time since we've done a Lunch and Learn, and we only really had a little mini break for the summer season, and here we are back. And it's such a pleasure for our first Lunch and Learn of this season to be with one of our all-time favourites, the wonderful Jackie Lynch. Welcome back, Jackie. Three-quarters of the way through the year and our first Lunch and Learn for this season. And I've got to say, boom, energy. Oh, you can't see it because I've got a background.
Oh, I'll
And
hold it up.
you hold it up. There you go. Energy. Now, I've got to say, this filled so super fast and is one of our biggest lunch and learns. So I think the launch of your new book yesterday, right, hot off the press, combined with the title Menopause, Your Guide to Energy, I think you've really hit something that is so important to us all. For
So,
me personally, take off the slide so I can see you. Me personally, when I saw it, I thought your guide to energy. I thought, oh, how often do we all feel that we've got no fuel in our tank? Then on top of that, you've got the seasonal bugs. And once upon a time, it was just colds and flu. And now you've got COVID all year, and that's sapping at energy. So I'm looking at this and thinking, yep, this is something that we all need to know about. And we've had so many pre-submitted questions. I think you've hit an all-time record. So
wow.
I'm going to start by saying energy, Jackie. What's it all about?
Well, energy is so important because it's much more than just feeling tired. That's the thing. Every single body cell, every organ, every system needs energy to function. It drives our brain function, our memory, it supports digestion, optimizes immunity, supports our reproductive system. In fact, there's even a special supply of energy in sperm cells to support motility. It literally drives everything. So when you're low in energy, it's not just that you'll be struggling to get off the sofa, it's going to impair everything that works or rather doesn't work in that point. So we need to think sort of really carefully about supporting our energy because tiredness will affect us at every single cellular level.
Okay, so actually so when I say fuel in the tank, it's much, much more than that. It's every cell in your body is powered
Yeah.
by our energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a sense, what happens is the body takes the food that we eat and it combines it with oxygen to produce energy. And that energy is produced in every single body cell. And it's a very complex chain reaction, which requires the right balance of macronutrients, so the proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and then all the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, which act as catalyst links in the chain so that each step happens correctly. And if you're not getting the right balance of macros or you've got some kind of micronutrient deficiency, it will affect the chain reaction and tiredness will kick in. And it can affect you, as I've already said, at a number of levels.
So when you say fueling up for energy and your macros, I mean, we all know that I'm not a registered nutritionist, so what should I be eating then? And probably what's missing for me if I'm feeling flat?
Right. Well, the single simplest and quickest and preferred source of energy for the body is actually carbohydrate. And, carbs have a pretty bad rap these days, and everyone's on these low carb diets. But carbohydrate is a broad church. It's not just about having lots of sugar and sugary foods and bread and so on. Whole grain foods, so brown rice, brown pasta, brown bread. Vegetables are a fantastic source of complex carbohydrate. Fruits with an edible skin because the fiber is mainly in the skin. These complex carbohydrates the body burns through more slowly, so it provides a sustained, slow, steady source of energy as opposed to the quick fix you might get from a blast of sugar, because what goes up must come down. So carbs are important, and if you do ignore them at your peril, especially in midlife, and if you've got quite a physical job, people who are on their feet, for example, like nurses rushing around, then really thinking about getting the right level of complex carbohydrate is important. Now, protein is important in a different way. It's not the body's preferred source of energy, and in fact, it's the third of the three that the body will turn to. Really only turns to it if there's a state of sort of depletion going on, because protein is used for many other things in the body. But one of the things that's important about proteins is that the amino acids found in protein-rich foods power the brain. So they will activate and create key neurotransmitters that regulate things like mood and memory and creativity and focus and concentration. So having that sort of broad church of proteins, women tend to be very poor at having enough protein. So it's that combination of protein and complex carbohydrate. Every meal, every snack keeps the blood sugar nicely balanced so you don't have these peaks and troughs that can really cause energy dips. And you're actually going to be providing your body the fuel it needs to get on with the chain reaction I've described.
Oh, now you might have hit something there because I make sure I've got protein every single meal. Because as a menopausal woman, I know that's important to me, whether that's now or thinking about my bone health and my long-term health. So I probably dialed back on my carbs.
Yeah.
And sometimes my body just absolutely craves, and I'm going to put it down to maybe my body's telling me that chocolate, get it, have some chocolate, refuel yourself, put some extra things in. So maybe I've just got the balance wrong right now.
Yeah. I mean, when you've got those cravings for carbohydrate, it's because your blood sugar is low. And the trick is not to let it get low. So having the complex carbs will avoid that happening essentially, because once the blood sugar crashes, your hormones are going to be driving those cravings. And we all know that in a battle with the hormones, they will win every time. So you're going to reach for the chocolate. So rather than just thinking, oh, I'm on a weight loss diet, I'm not going to have any carbohydrate, well, maybe think about having your starchy carbs at lunchtime so that you're sort of getting those, perhaps at a busier time of day anyway, when you might need them. You don't need to be having large amounts, a fist-sized portion of brown rice or quinoa, for example, or oats, depending on what it is you're having, would be sufficient alongside a good source of protein as well. And we mustn't discount fat, because I realise I didn't mention that, and I don't want everyone thinking, oh, well, then we should avoid fat. That's not the case. Fat is an incredibly rich source of sustained energy for the body. So if there's no carbohydrate around, the body will use the fat as a nice steady source for endurance activities in particular. So it's about having all three. And the good news is that foods that contain protein by and large contain fat. So you've got that balance already.
Okay, so that's protein, carbs, and fat
Yeah.
in the right proportion. So what does my plate look like then?
Very simple. If you think of your plate as a quadrant like that, 1/4 of the meal is going to be protein, about a fist size, so a chicken breast size or equivalent portion size of tofu if you're on a plant-based diet. 1/4 of starchy carbohydrate, but complex carbs, whether that is sweet potato or brown rice or whole grain pasta, for example. And then 2 portions of vegetables, 1/4 of green vegetables, 1/4 of other vegetables, any other color you like, tomatoes, carrots, cauliflower, mushrooms, onions, what have you. And that way, on 3/4 of that meal is actually going to be carbohydrate, but it's all going to be complex carbs. And that really gives you that sustained, steady energy. And all those vegetables have all those micronutrients that you need for energy, things like B vitamins, magnesium, vitamin C, iron, that really play a big role in the chain reaction as well.
I was going to ask you because you mentioned macros, and I think that's the carbs, protein, fats.
Yeah.
But then there's also, and I loved I did your last year. What was it, last year or the year before?
I
Where
think it was two
you
years ago.
no, where you gave us a list of things and told us not to, to eat something different on there. So every single day. And I found that really useful. And actually, I can remember feeling pretty good after I did that. And I think that's because of those, not supplements. What did you call them? The vitamins, the magnesium, the iron. You're
Yeah.
getting much more of
Those
the balance of
micronutrients.
those. They're
Yeah.
micro, are they?
Yeah, they're the micros, absolutely. And they're really important because once you've got the balance of the macros right, if you're still feeling rubbish, then Almost certainly, assuming you've ruled out any medical condition, and it's always important to do that first, it's going to come down to some kind of imbalance on the micronutrient front. A lot of women in perimenopause struggle with iron deficiency anemia because, of course, they're having heavy periods or flooding. If you're low in iron, you're going to be feeling weak and tired and pale, almost as if you can't even lift your arms or your legs, you're so tired. Headaches, anxiety, sore tongue, all of these are classic signs of iron deficiency anemia. And although, there's lots to be said for a plant-based diet, there is this big trend towards that, and a lot of women therefore aren't getting as much absorbable iron as they might need, because iron comes in two forms: heme iron, found in animal foods, and non-heme iron found in plant foods. And the heme iron is much more easily absorbed in the body than the non-heme iron. And basically, some people just do better on the animal sources of iron. So perhaps, erring more on the side of making sure you're having at least some kind of animal protein a few times a week, even if it's not your favorite thing. And if you don't have any problems having animal protein, I'd say make sure you're having it every day. So meat, fish, eggs, for example, great sources of iron. And if you're worried about your iron levels, get a blood test.
Do you know, Jackie, I think this is the first time that you've made me think that a McDonald's is better than spinach.
Well, maybe one of those like really good quality burgers you get in nice places, as opposed to something particularly processed. But, I leave that with you. And it doesn't have to be beef. Venison is a much leaner source of meat than beef, and actually contains more iron per 100 grams. So it all depends.
But you touched on different diets there, and I think mine's reasonably balanced. But for some of us, we have either intolerances or preferences.
Mm.
So, thinking here of those that are vegan or vegetarian and have to look for other alternatives.
Well, for vegetarians, you've always got the option of eggs, which are a brilliant source of iron. You can also look for obviously all the plant sources of iron, things like spinach, tofu's a decent source, some of the pulses, nuts and seeds. But you need to really make sure you're getting more of them. So you might be having more of them every day in your diet, making sure you're getting the right balance, and bearing in mind that they are much more vulnerable to things like compounds in tea or coffee than heme iron. Heme iron won't be affected if you have a cup of tea with your meal. Your body will absorb it anyway. Non-heme iron will be blocked by the compounds in tea and coffee. So having a sort of 2-hour break can make sure you're absorbing if you're largely on a plant-based diet, for example. Vitamin C, you may have heard, supports the absorption of iron. It does indeed. Doesn't make a blind bit of difference to heme iron. It doesn't need that extra help. But non-heme iron, so plant sources of iron, they will benefit from that. So, if you're having some spinach, then maybe have a glass of orange juice or some strawberries for pudding, or just things to be topping up that extra vitamin C. Because it's not just all about iron.
No, but it is actually making me think, belt and braces here. Can I take supplements?
Well, iron's a tricky one because the body can't excrete iron in the way it can excrete certain other vitamins and minerals. So you shouldn't be taking iron tablets unless you've actually had a blood test and identified that your iron is low, because there are other reasons that with symptoms that are still very similar. For example, things, the fatigue, the weakness, the brain fog, the anxiety can happen when you're very low in vitamin B12. You might be taking iron tablets. If you don't need the iron, it will build up in your tissues, and that can over time lead to toxicity. So always get a blood test and check with your doctor before you start randomly taking iron tablets. That's quite important.
Right, okay. But what about the other supplements that you mentioned earlier, the bees?
Yeah, so B vitamins, big family of nutrients, heavily involved in energy. Half of them are in the links in the chain reaction of energy production, and the other half are involved in red blood cell production. And red blood cell production is really important because that's what carries the oxygen around the body. And it's the oxygen that combines with the food to create the energy. So if you're low in red blood cells, that's going to be affecting your energy levels. So B6, B12, and folate, vitamin B9, in other words, are all responsible for supporting red blood cells. That's why if you go to the doctor and say you're tired, you'll get checked for B12 and folate deficiency, for example. Now, vitamin B12 deficiency is very common. It's heavily depleted by stress, and you will feel on the floor with exhaustion. And it's a big contributor to brain fog. Really common. Some women have conditions such as pernicious anemia, which means they can't absorb it from the food that they eat. and actually need injections from their doctor. Also, again, it's a bit of an issue because B12 is only naturally found in animal sources. So if you're on a vegan diet or largely plant-based diet, you do need to be supplementing. Even if you think, well, I've been vegan for 2 years and I'm fine, it's only now I feel tired. The body can store B12 for up to 3 to 5 years. So in fact, it might have caught up with you. So always worth checking if you're sort of not having a particularly animal-based diet, because again, it's something I see in my nutrition clinic a lot. It's not always the popular choice, but when I encourage women to go a little bit more towards, well, can you at least, have an egg a couple of times a week? These things can make a big difference to the way they're feeling.
Right. Okay. So, so getting into the habit of looking at that at your plate
Yeah,
and doing the quarters is a good one. Maybe sort of being more mindful of, yeah, carbs have got a bad rap, but it's just as important to eat, as you say, complex carbs as
yeah,
it is to get your right protein and your two fistfuls then of green and something else.
yeah,
Veg.
absolutely. And then you see it ticks all the boxes, because those two boxes of veg, they are they're going to have iron in because green vegetables are rich in iron. They'll have a lot of the B vitamins apart from B12. They'll have all the others. They'll have vitamin C, which is important for energy production, and they're packed with magnesium. And we haven't even touched on magnesium. And I think, most women are probably already aware that magnesium helps in some way with energy. It's like our ignition key. So we definitely need plenty of magnesium. So if everything I'm saying is starting to sound complicated, just think about that quadrant and think about the two different portions of vegetables, because without even worrying, you're then starting to get the balance you need.
And it is one of those ones around awareness and education around this, but getting into the habit of
Mm.
doing it and not forgetting it. And I don't know how long it takes for you to feel, I don't know, that you've refueled the tank, but you will.
Yeah, well, it depends. With protein, I tend to notice with my ladies that within about 10 days, if they're eating protein with every meal, and a lot of them haven't been up till then, they see a difference like that. It's very quick. Iron takes longer because the body takes longer for it to sort of absorb into the tissues. And that's why if you take iron tablets, presuming they've been prescribed, it can take up to 6 months for the balance to redress properly. Magnesium, again, is a pretty quick win. And the great thing is magnesium works transdermally as well. So you can have things like Epsom salts baths, which is magnesium sulfate, or you can get great sprays and lotions that are particularly good if you've got sort of tired, achy muscles or struggle to get off to sleep. And let's not forget, how many of you have got a glass of water there with you? I bet you have, Deborah, because you're such a star. Um, just 2% of dehydration can create at least 15% lack of energy, lack of focus, concentration, and physical energy as well. So make sure that you're drinking plenty.
Well, that's fascinating. So, and actually, you're saying that none of it's really hard. It's
No, it's
just
not
sort
rocket
of take
science.
stock and do
Yeah,
things a little bit differently. I'm going to ask
absolutely.
Sally to join me because I can see the chat going absolutely bonkers.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I've got my water here.
Oh, well done. What a star.
Okay, yeah, we've got loads of those questions, and thank you as well. People are also sharing their experiences as always on these sessions, which we really appreciate. So first thing was, it's come up quite a few times around sources of protein,
Mhm.
especially for vegetarians and vegans. Kind of what are your top tips for ensuring people are getting enough protein?
Okay, well, first of all, protein with every meal and snack. So what is protein? Animal proteins, meat, fish, eggs, and certain sources of dairy, such as cottage cheese and authentic, like strained Greek yogurt, are the strongest protein sources of dairy. For vegan plant-based sources, lentils, chickpeas, beans, soya, quinoa, nuts, seeds, all good sources. The thing about protein is that it comes in two forms. You've got complete protein, which contains all the essential amino acids in one easy package, everything your body needs to create the remaining amino acids to do all the other jobs that have to go on. Animal foods automatically are complete proteins. Very few plant proteins are complete proteins. So you've got to work harder if you're vegetarian or vegan to make sure that you're getting different types of lentils, different types of nuts, different types of seeds to mix and match. Soya is and hemp, although that's sort of not a very everyday food, are two examples of complete proteins. Quinoa is a complete protein, but because it's also a starch, there's not so much protein in there, but what is there is complete. And so what I recommend to my vegan clients is that they are having at least one portion of complete protein with a meal every day. And then it might be soya tofu stir fry at lunchtime, and then it's lentils in the evening, and the morning's been, I don't know, some kind of, nuts and seeds, Burka muesli type affair. So the breakfast and dinner is plant-based, incomplete protein, and lunch is a complete protein. So thinking about trying to get hemp or soya or quinoa in once a day, every day, to keep that level of complete protein up so that you're getting everything you need without having to work too hard at mixing and matching the rest.
Fantastic, brilliant. We've got lots of people asking about snacks, so suggestions for healthy snacks, in particular no cook snacks or quick to grab snacks that have that balance of nutrients in.
Right. Well, again, it's all about protein and fiber. So shoving a piece of fruit in your bag with 6 or 7 almonds, protein, fiber. Ideally a fruit with an edible skin, like an apple or a plum. Plums are in season right now. And then, not overdoing it, not a massive handful of nuts, but, 6 or 7, nice amount of protein there. The winner always is hummus, whether it's hummus with carrot sticks, you can buy those little pre-packed things, snack packs, or if you're at home, you could maybe have it on a couple of oat cakes. So again, you've got that protein fiber combo. There are some great recipes online to make your own very, very simple protein balls, and you can choose the ingredients to suit you. A lot of them have coconut in, which I don't particularly like, but if you sort of mix and match, you can find other ways to do that for ingredients that do suit you. And they're things, again, that you could pop in your bag. Alternatively, there are brands like Pulsin, Pulsin, pulsin.co.uk, who do these great bars called, I hate the name, they're called keto bars, but they are packed with protein and very tasty. So they can be a good thing to get hold of and shove in your bag as well if you're on the go a lot. And rather than missing a meal, at least you're having one of these that really will keep you going. So those are perhaps some of the kind of things I'd suggest as a quick fix.
Fantastic, brilliant. A kind of overriding question is what can we do to ensure our bodies are getting what we need? So I think this is the thing people said about blood tests for if they're deficient in things, is that important? Supplements they should take. It's that piece of how do we know that we're getting what our bodies need?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the risk of plugging my new book, I've got a whole series of quizzes in there, and each quiz will help you identify the particular deficiency and give you a sense of exactly what you've got to do about it. So I think the first port of call if you're not feeling well is to go to your doctor. That is what they are there for. They will run some standard tests. They'll probably check your thyroid, they'll check your B12, your iron, your folate, vitamin D. If you're feeling tired, those are the classic roster of tests. If all that ends up being normal, then the chances are you need to start looking at your diet and lifestyle. So I would look very much at focusing on getting the macro balance right. Are you eating enough protein? Thinking about that plate. Again, my quadrant is very nice because it stops you having to weigh food, and it stops you having to think about, oh, am I getting enough zinc? Have I got the whatevers? It's there. If you do that green veg, other veg, it's all just going to be there, and it does make life easier. It's a habit, as Deborah said, it's about getting into that habit. So the first week will be a bit tricky because you won't be used to that. And if you're thinking, well, at lunchtime, I don't plate up, but you can think laterally, maybe have a wholemeal sandwich, and then instead of having that sort of pathetic slice of ham you'll get with a meal deal, which is always really stingy, I want chunks of protein. So chunks of tuna, chunks of chicken, chunks of hummus and falafel, and then 2 vegetables in there, maybe spinach and cucumber or lettuce and tomato. So suddenly that sandwich starts to look like something that's actually properly nutritious and will keep you going. So thinking a bit laterally about my quadrant, and then in the evening, you're generally going to be plating up anyway, so you can get back to that.
Yeah, brilliant. And someone's asked around, you mentioned about testing for folic would be one of the tests, and someone said that they've got celiac disease, low gluten-free diet, and so they're deficient in folic acid. They've been taking supplements prescribed by their doctor, but they've been on it for nearly 3 months. They're nearly 4 weeks in, and they're not really seeing any improvement. Just in terms of taking supplements, if we're deficient in something, how long could it be until someone might see an improvement in their energy levels or how they're feeling?
It's a good question. It will depend. I mean, with iron, it can take several weeks, and certainly a doctor won't want to retest before 3 months at the earliest. Sometimes it can take up to 6 months for that to show. With something like folate, because folic acid is the synthetic form of the actual vitamin, which is folate, it's because it's involved in the red blood cell situation, it might take a little bit longer. But if it had been 4 weeks, I'd have expected some sort of minor improvement at the very least. So it might be worth having a chat with your doctor just to sort of run any further tests. If if you're feeling incredibly tired and it still hasn't helped in 4 weeks, just to see if there's anything else that might be going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next ones are really about sleep. So loads of people saying that they're really struggling with their sleep, which is what's affecting their energy. Anything that we should be thinking about, and I know we've done sessions on sleep, we've talked to you about sleep before, but just some top tips on things from a nutrition point of view in terms of what we're eating and drinking when that could help.
Yeah. If you struggle to get off to sleep, but you're okay once you do, but it can take a while, then that's all about magnesium, because magnesium calms the nervous system. As well as supporting energy, it's great for helping us de-stress and unwind. That's where an Epsom salts bath is great, because you've got a bit of me time along with the transdermal magnesium, or those sprays and lotions I've mentioned, if you're not particularly keen on taking supplements. If you are going to take oral supplements, two things. One is that if you're on medication, always check with your doctor first, because there can be interactions. And you want to make sure that there aren't for you. And secondly, the maximum recommended daily dose of oral magnesium is 400 milligrams, unless you're under the guidance of a health professional. So keep an eye on that and respect the dosage on the label. But what's quite good for sleep generally is the more transdermal ones, particularly baths, because they just really do sort of set you up nicely for that. So that can be a good one. If, on the other hand, you get off to sleep okay, but tend to wake up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason, it's not a hot flush, doesn't seem to be any noise, but you're still awake, that's almost certainly blood sugar. So looking at what you've been eating in the evening, did you come home and have pasta with tomato sauce? So white pasta, refined carbohydrate, tomato sauce, not an ounce of protein. So blood sugar gradually has crashed. And the cortisol, which is released when your blood sugar crashes, will be waking you up because it wants to create the fight or flight response. So thinking hard about having good quality protein and complex carbohydrate in the evening. And if you think, well, I do that already, perhaps you've forgotten that once you sit down in front of the TV, out come the crisps and the chocolate or a glass of wine, and all of that can then suddenly send the blood sugar spiking back up. So thinking hard about what you're actually doing in the evening, because that blood sugar balance will make a big difference to your sleep. And also think about two other obvious things. One is caffeine and the other is alcohol. As midlife women, our ability to metabolize caffeine changes. So what you used to get away with, you might not be able to get away with now. So don't assume that because it's always worked, it's not that that's causing the problem. You may need to audit your caffeine intake and stop it earlier in the day, because it is an incredibly powerful stimulant and can really muck up sleep. And alcohol, you might think, oh, a little nightcap helps me get off to sleep, but it's actually a sedative. It's a sedative, and so it's going to disrupt your sleep, and it's going to prolong the REM phase of sleep, which is quite an agitated form when we dream. So that's going to have you waking feeling unrefreshed and tired. So, taking a break from alcohol at least 4 consecutive days each week to give your liver a bit of a break, you'll probably find on those days you'll sleep a lot better.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I've just got one more question.
Oh, go on, you go first.
One more question. Just someone's talked about cholesterol and like the difference between good and bad cholesterol and good and bad fats, and they're kind of a bit confused around that. So just any things that people should be mindful of and aware of in terms of
good and bad
managing
tricky terms, because all cholesterol is actually required by the body. LDL is the one that's known as bad, and HDL is the one that's known as good. It's essentially because of the jobs that they do. So LDL carries, it's a carrier protein. It carries the cholesterol to our body cells, where it does all sorts of important things, including creating sex hormones, by the way. So the human race would die out if we didn't have cholesterol. And then the HDL takes it away to be processed and excreted from the body. So what you need is a correct balance, a bit like the recycling guys turning up correctly to take everything away and not allowing the bins to pile up. If the bins pile up, that's when LDL becomes bad cholesterol because there's too much of it there, and that can start to lead to fatty deposits, which can cause problems and with the arteries and cardiovascular disease. So that's what's going on there. It's about getting that balance right. Cholesterol in and of itself is not bad. It's the balance between the two, and that's why when you get a test, you're given the ratio, and your doctor would be able to explain that to you. Again, with fats, it's not about good or bad fats. Aside from artificial trans fats, which do not really exist in nature because they've been created by hydrogenating fats at a very high temperature, so they denature, which prolongs the shelf life. So that's what manufacturers are doing. But a standard saturated fat, a monounsaturated or a polyunsaturated fat, they're all meant to be there. Any food that contains fat has all three in. And saturated fats make sex hormones. Polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats support heart health, brain health, hormone health. So it's about getting the right ratio. We need about 20 grams of saturated fats as women per day in our diet. So don't strip out the fat completely because it will not help your cause.
Thank you very much. And Sally, I will. There was one that somebody was asking about. When do you take your progesterone tablet in the evening? I've got to say, I started taking mine an hour earlier before I went to bed, and it did make quite a big difference. Or is it that I've just changed my drinking chocolate? I always have a cup of cocoa before I go to bed with some milk, which I think is pretty good. But Jackie, thank you very much, and thank you, Sally, and thank you to everybody for your comments. Yes, you will have access to this recording. I'm not sure if we can share the webinar chat because it's got too many people's names and things in it. But I was actually reading your quizzes. People want to know more, Jackie. So I think this is and I'll ask the people on the chat. Do you want Jackie to come back and tell us a little bit like quiz one? This is one I think is going to be popular.
Oh.
Do you struggle to lose abdominal fat?
Yes, right.
Do you struggle to lose abdominal fat? I saw there were some questions in there, so I jumped straight into the book to see if you covered it. And some people have been saying, yeah, really struggling to lose weight. And actually, there's got to be something in that then, hasn't there? You know, that struggling. How many of us will say, I put it on my waist and it doesn't come off? So I think we need to invite you back, Jackie. Do get the book. Unfortunately, I've now done what I never do and put a crease in mine, so it's been a bit well thumbed. It's a very, very good book and lots of things.
Thanks,
But the recording's available. It'll be available this afternoon, and then we'll get the transcript ready as well. So you know us, we always want to do what we can to support our wonderful community. So thank you very much to our wonderful community for joining in with us, Jackie and Sally, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. So thank you.
Thank you.